That's a brand new Testament.
Brand new Testament.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy one. I already have the user guide and the style guide and this one as well.
Basic manual.
Okay.
Very good.
Welcome guys. Fijn dat jullie allemaal in grote getallen in het zaaltje zijn gekomen. Het is ook de laatste keer trouwens, want na 31 mei gaat dit gebouw plat. En dan zal de vuist vanaf volgend jaar in de nieuwe locatie hier zitten, daar of daar, een van de twee. Ja, de ROX 2026. We hebben vandaag twee sprekers. De spreker van vanochtend, Steve Revill van RiscOS Open. Het is eigenlijk een beetje een surprise act, omdat hij meegekomen is met Robert Sprouse, die vanmiddag om 2 uur wat gaat vertellen. Maar dan over RiscOS in het algemeen. Deze presentatie gaat heel specifiek over BBC Basic. En ik denk dat jullie wel BBC Basic wel kennen, want zo eigenlijk...
Het is wel.
Ja. Begin jaren 80 is het ontwikkeld, het draait zelfs op de Atom. En je kan het zo gek niet bedenken of de Spectrum, de PC, zelfs onder Windows kun je BBC Basic gaan draaien. En er zijn heel wat ontwikkelingen in de loop van de jaren geweest. De basis is altijd hetzelfde gebleven, maar er zijn de nodige uitbreidingen op geweest, ook zeker in combinatie natuurlijk met RiscOS. And Steve, I'm very interested to hear from you what you're going to tell about BBC Basic. I suppose you're not going to talk directly.
I was just going to read the manual.
Chapter 1. So maybe misschien zijn we om 4 uur klaar, maar dat is een hele knappe jongen in ieder geval. So I'm going to bring this back to Robert.
Yes.
And I'll give you the mic. And,
Very good.
Good luck, and I'll turn off the lights. There you are. Come on, enjoy.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'll start on page 1, and then we'll be here all week. So hopefully you can all hear me okay. I'm very happy to be here. I've seen some of you guys in the UK at some of the RiscOS shows, and now I'm very happy to be over here and able to speak to you. It's great. And it's unusual for me not to be speaking about RiscOS Open. I'm taking a break from that to speak about one of my passions, which is BASIC. And I just wanted to share some of my love of the language and why I like it and why I want to still keep using it. And I'll start just by saying a few things about my background with BASIC. So this was the language I first experienced on the Acorn Electron, and I remember very clearly, I remember getting an Acorn Electron and being amazed and happy. This was the future. I'd got a computer now in my own hands, and then it also came with the manual that had BASIC in it, and I started reading it, and it was like line 10, print, and I thought as a young child, oh, I'm bored of reading this, I'll just write a program, and it's a computer, surely this is like Star Trek. So I just wrote line 10, draw a cricket pitch, line 20, draw the bowler, and then bowl the ball, and then I just typed run, and it was mistake at line 10. Huh. And straight away I was intrigued, and I was like, right, manual, better read this. So immediately it was just as easy as that to start learning how to program, and that really is the point of BASIC. It was created in 1964, so Dartmouth, and it was created in the US particularly to create a tool to allow students to learn how to program mainframe computers and make it as easy and accessible as possible. And since that time, there's been a huge number of different versions of the language. On the stand, I've got a family tree that we've created of all the different variants of BASIC, not all of them, but many of them, and the different directions it went in. And the direction, of course, that I'm interested in is the Acorn direction. And the Acorn Atom, I had the pleasure of seeing one on the stand over there, an Atom running Atom Basic, and I've never seen that before, so it's brilliant. And seeing people connecting to Google Gemini on their Atom is hilarious. So it was really became BBC Basic at the behest of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, when they wanted to roll out the Creator Computer for schools to teach children all about computing, and BASIC was the obvious choice of the programming language to use. And then this rumour has circulated for years that the first version of the ARM chip was modelled in BBC Basic. In just a few hundred lines of BASIC, they simulated the ARM chip before they ever built it. And then when RiscOS came out, late 1980s, when it was Arthur and RiscOS, Basic 5 was the one that I really grew up programming. So that had more powerful language features, the extended if statements and things like that. And that's still, you can go to any RiscOS machine now and RiscOS 5 will be there. And it's very helpful when you're creating a new RiscOS machine and you're trying to get the thing working in the first place, to have a programming language built in straight away. You can start poking around bits of memory, get yourself out of trouble. It's invaluable to have that facility built in to the computer. There is hidden in the source code, you can build BBC Basic, and when it first runs, there's Roger Wilson's signature is built into the source code of BASIC. Now Sophie Wilson, of course, but at the time Roger was the author, and they like to hide the little Easter eggs inside BASIC. So if you change one line of source code, it switches it into this mode, which most people have never seen, I don't think. So your challenge now is to go on the RiscOS Open GitLab server and find the source code to BASIC and find out where this is hidden in the source code, because it's there. In 1997, that's when I got my first job at Acorn. So my whole childhood had been using Acorn machines and programming on Acorn machines. And when I was graduating at university, I sent one job application out. There was only one place I was determined to work at, and it was Acorn. So I was very fortunate to get a job there. And I was equally fortunate to end up working with people like Sophie Wilson and Jim Westwood and other characters from the history of Acorn. And Sophie recognised in me the passion for BASIC, and there was a kind of a handing over of the reins. So Sophie allowed me to take over maintaining BASIC within Acorn, which was great. And the first thing I did was reformat all the source code and start adding comments, because Sophie hated spending time on presentation, just get it out of the brain, get it all down there. Very clever, but for anyone else to look at it, it was impossible to understand how it worked. So that was one of the first things I did. And then we had this whole roller coaster of the company changing hands and changing name. We had some very odd meetings where we all walked across the road from Acorn into a church, and they had this big presentation about the bright, shining future of Acorn as Element 14 and how it was going to be amazing. And then on the way out of the building, they handed out letters to everyone as they walked past. And people were all stood in the car park opening their letters. And it said, "Congratulations, you've still got a job," or you don't have a job anymore. And it was very, very strange. But in the end, I think it was all just about selling the ARM shares and making lots of money, unfortunately. But then Castle bought the rights to RiscOS from Pace, and I was working freelance at that point, and I helped Castle with the Ionics when they were working on that. And that was a new lease of life, I think, for RiscOS, because it was put back into the hands of people that were passionate about it and that cared about its future. And in fact, it was through working with Castle that we were able to negotiate about the shared source project, and RiscOS Open was formed, and we started publishing all of the source code. This is a slight detour, but it's all about the journey of making sure that RiscOS survives into the future. Was about open sourcing it, and open sourcing BASIC was a big part of that as well, because I wanted the language not only to be available in all RiscOS machines, but available for anyone to fix it and update it and add features. But unfortunately, times have marched on, and ARM chips are getting more sophisticated, and we're looking at a point where things like BASIC, written in very carefully written 32-bit assembler, won't run on modern ARM chips. So something has to change, and that's why I started looking at, last year I started looking at rewriting BASIC in C, ironically. So where have I got to with that? First of all, I looked at where we stand, and I realised it's a big, complicated piece of code. It is enormous. And to add anything to it or to adapt it is very hard. And to try and make it run on a modern ARM as it currently stands, it's not really straightforward, and it's not really practical to do it with the current code. So I then looked at other versions of BASIC that were very similar to BBC BASIC that are already out there, like Brandy and like BBC BASIC for Windows and Basic SDL. And for various reasons, I looked at them and decided that they weren't the right fit for being the future BASIC for RiscOS, primarily because I want it to stick to the legacy of what BASIC is and how it works, and be able to run the existing programs that we all know and love that are written in BASIC. And I want it to be sufficiently small that it can sit inside the ROM image of a RiscOS machine, so that if you boot your RiscOS machine and nothing else is working, you've still got BASIC. So that led me to the conclusion that it needed to be a rewrite in C, and I couldn't use one of these pre-existing projects. So within RiscOS Open, we agreed what the goals are, and we decided, obviously, it has to be open source, and we want to be able to run all the applications that are currently written in BASIC. There's some very strange, crazy things that people do in BASIC, and I might not be able to support all of them, but we can do our best. And the other thing was to try and not build in lots of knowledge about the platform, the specific hardware that it's running on, and make it as portable as possible, so that we're not stuck with every time a new RiscOS machine comes out or a new ARM chip, you have to do a big rewrite of everything. I don't want to do that. I want to just make it so it's easy to recompile it and make it work on another machine, to the point where I can, at the moment, I can compile it and run it on Windows. And the critical thing is I want to be able to maintain the source code in the future. I want anyone to be able to look at it, understand it, figure out how it works, and add things to BASIC, add new language features, make it better. And that's more important to me than making it faster and smaller. I'd rather it be a little bit slower but easier to maintain and easier to adapt than to go all out for high performance at the expense of not being able to understand how it works anymore. So really, that good performance, it's all about not compromising the other goals. So here we are. This is where I've got to so far. This side is what works. now in the C version of BASIC, and this side is still on the to-do list, so it hasn't been done yet. Some of this stuff is graphics. I've got a version of it that works on Windows in a very basic way, so it's very good. It's a little Python program that sits there with a window open, and when you do graphics commands in BASIC, they all appear in that window. So it's just sending little messages to that Python program in the background, and that was just for me to allow me to do testing. So it shouldn't take much work to get a lot of the graphics stuff working on RiscOS, but there is a lot of complexity in all of that stuff on the right that still needs doing. So that was probably took about 9 months of some quite long days to do this piece on the left, and there's at least 9 to 12 months of work left on it. So yeah, I've kind of summarized what's been done so far. You can, in this version of BASIC, you can say I want integers to be 64 bits wide. So I want my integers to be long integers in a way. And you can choose that every time you start a BASIC program. You can say this one, I want 64-bit integers, this one's traditional 32 bits. And this is an example of it running on RiscOS. It's quite colourful as well. So one thing to notice is these numbers are very long. That's a lot longer numbers than BASIC would normally do. So we can load a program, can run it, and you can see the state of all the variables. And then this is it running on Windows. Not very easy to see, but there's BASIC running here in a terminal, and then there's some graphics happening over here. I could show you at the stand if you want to see it running. But it's getting there, and the whole point is making it well-commented code, well-structured code, easy to read, easy to understand. And some of the side effects of doing this work are already benefiting RiscOS now. So part of my work, I spotted a bug in ARM BASIC where certain matrix multiplications were going wrong. So we fixed that bug, so that's now been fixed in BASIC. We've added some new features to the sys keyword, so you can now get some useful features out of BASIC that weren't there before, which saves you from writing some fairly grotty code to have to do some of the things that this can now do very neatly. And it also meant the whole thing that I was doing was looking at that manual, which is now gone, and every page, I treated that manual as that was the Bible for me. So I wasn't looking at the source code to BASIC, I was looking at the manual, and then I was running BASIC and seeing what BASIC does. And so I was trying to do those two things and write my code to make that happen without looking at how BASIC does it, as much as possible. And as I was doing it, I kept finding things in the manual that I was just like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, I don't know what that means. I can't understand that. So I was constantly finding things that needed to change. And so one of the things that I did was I just spent a few weeks just updating the manual. So now we have a 4th edition of the manual, which just corrects everything that I found that was wrong or missing or misleading. So yeah, you can see what we've done on the stand if you'd like. So how do we finish this work? The main thing is the moonshots that you may have heard about. This is our fundraising activity, and it's all about bringing RiscOS into a state where it can run on new ARM chips. And one big part of that is BASIC. BASIC is one of the big hard parts of RiscOS. And so part of the moonshots is just accepting donations from companies, from people. We're even looking at grant funding from various places, Europe and the UK. because it's not easy. As I said, it was about 9 months to do what I did do. I can't afford to spend another year on it and still pay my bills. So somehow we have to collect enough money to pay for that to happen. And one thing we are doing is we had someone very generously offered to match any donations into the moonshots for the next month or so. So up to a total of about £4,000. For the next £4,000 that gets donated into the moonshots, RiscOS Open will be able to match those donations and double them. So that is leading up to the 20th of June, which is going to be RiscOS Open's 20th birthday. So that will be our birthday celebration. So just so you know, if you can find any rich relatives or corporations that you know who just have money falling out of their pockets, just point them in this direction and say, we need some donations. So that's really what it takes to finish these sorts of projects, because they are big, difficult projects, and when people take a significant chunk of time out of them, that's a chunk of time that they're giving up earning a salary. So it needs some other way to help fund it. And that was all. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, or have any conversation about this. Thank you.
From a rule point of view, to do, say, BBC Basic for Linux or Mac?
So we're not planning on it, but it could fall out of a side effect of this work. The fact that it can run on Windows, it's portable enough, it could run on Linux as well, and a Mac is essentially just Unix, isn't it? So it's there's no reason. The thing that gets more difficult is it would need a layer to add the local kind of graphics and sound integration. So someone have to do that bit. But I've already had some shows that I've been at when there's people who've been doing their own things with like SDL on Windows, and they've got a library for that. So if you tie the two things together, it might work. So we're not directly planning to do it, but the fact it's open source and the fact that 90% of it will work anyway, it's just a bit of glue that would need doing for different machines. Yes.
Say, hypothetically, I want to do something with using it as a scripting engine.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in graphics anymore.
Yeah, if you just want to open some files, read some stuff, write some files, that would just work. Yeah. But things like sound and graphics is where it gets a bit more fun. And speaking to the hardware generally, like just Inky, tell me what key you've pressed, things like that. So there's just, for those extra features of the language, some little bit of glue would need to be written. Hello.
Paul,
Yes.
working very hard at programming the little Pico.
Oh, yes.
The basic.
Yes.
Russell.
Russell, yeah.
Made any chance that this version can also run on Pico?
Unclear. So possibly it's quite low, quite small, isn't it? The Pico. Yeah, I'm not sure. Possibly, yes, with a bit of work. Yeah. So that's Richard Russell, is it? That's doing something. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it might be that this could integrate against some of what Richard's done as well for all of his basic on Windows as well. But yeah, I've not looked at what he's doing with the Pico, but this might work on it. It's just C. It's just a case of, can you make it small enough for the Pico? Because it's very small. Yeah. Hello.
Build things like objects and garbage collection and etc. And long strings be added.
Oh, so there's not as part of this work, but doing this work makes doing that very much easier. And there is a page on the RiscOS Open website where I've listed all of the things we could do to BASIC, and one of them is like objects, long strings. They're the really obvious ones. There's various other things like try catch types of things. All of those become really easy, because the more I was writing it, the more I was thinking, oh, if I wanted to do long strings, I'd do it like this, and it would take, you know, a few days instead of or a few weeks testing it and everything. Whereas at the moment with the ARM version of BASIC, you'd be scratching your head for a month first, and then you'd be debugging for the next month. So yes, they all become possible, but they're not.
I also write somewhere.
Yeah.
But once you have optimized it, it's completely unreadable.
Yeah.
It's really a mess.
Yeah.
To start again.
There's somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Oh, what have I done? Oh dear. Somewhere in there's a screenshot of some of the source code to BASIC, and there's a comment from Sophie, from some colleague, where she's just said, David assures me that this will work. and there's another bit where here's someone's grotty way of dividing something by 2/pi. And it's just a wall of instructions that you just stare at and go, I assume that works. I don't want to change it ever. But yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's see. Is this going to allow me to click anywhere? Oh, yes. Yes, there we go. Here follows DJS's disgusting code for multiply. Yeah. So there's lots of bits like that in the source code, and you just look at this and go, I've got no idea what that does, or how it does it. Yeah, magic. And of course, the amusing thing is, if you wrote that in C, and then you targeted a modern ARM processor, it would probably generate 2 instructions to do the whole thing, because it would use VFP instructions. So all of that would go away, and it's quite. There's other benefits to doing it. Any other questions? Yes.
Testing of these little programs,
Yes.
that's only you or a team? Or
It's just been me so far, because it's so unfinished. I wouldn't want to punish anyone by giving them. Yeah. So there's there's a project I'm working on right now, which is LANMANFUS. So that's about Samba SMB mounts. And LANMAN has been traditionally stuck in the 1990s, and I've modernized it so it's now talking to modern Windows machines and modern NASes and Macs. So it's all the new security protocols. And the way I've been doing that is I got it to a certain point of working, and then I announced on the forum, the RiscOS Open forum, that I wanted people to help me test it. And then I've set up a Slack channel, and there's now 15 people from across the RiscOS community who for the last 3 weeks probably have been testing it and doing lots of different things, filing bug reports, and I've been sending new versions out. And there's a page on our website that anyone can look at, a page on our website that shows what's been happening with each new alpha release. So that's how I will do it.
Jouw suikerding ging af. Heb je suiker nodig? Nee? Kunnen we negeren? Ja? Okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So yeah, we'll have a test. So at the moment, the alpha, we're not really doing it out in the open, but at least we're showing how it's going in the open. And then the beta will be to just move it into the nightly builds on the RiscOS Open website and let everyone play with it. And then after some time, 6 months, a year, we'll say, this is good. And then it will go into a stable build. So yeah, that's how we'll do it. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.